Welcome to Native Bidaské, Native News Online's weekly spotlight on the people making news and leading change in Indian country.
Welcome to Native Bidaské. I'm Levi Rickert, publisher and founder, editor of Native News Online. And we are actually doing our last Native Bidaské of the year, 2023. We have a very special guest, Patricia Streng, who is a resident out in Kansas City, and she's written a book called Native American Resilience, a story of racism, genocide, and survival. Welcome, Patricia. How are you today?
I'm doing fine, Levi, and thank you for inviting me.
Hey, it's our pleasure. And you are a avid reader of Native News Online, and you are a member of our Founders Circle. And Founders Circle, for those of you who don't know, it's a group that we have that for recurring donors. They're part of the Founders Group, and they meet with us on a quarterly basis on a Zoom call. So if you're not a member of the Founders Circle, I encourage you to do so. But Patricia came through us through that. And that's one of the reasons we have the Founders Circle, is to really engage our readers with what we do at Native News Online. And I don't care how big we get, I still love the grassroots feel to Native News, and I always want to retain that. So having said all that, Patricia, welcome to Native Bidaské. Tell us about your book.
All right. I was inspired to write this book as a returning college student when I learned some of the horrible history regarding the treatment of the Native Americans. And then I attended a luncheon where I found out that the United States had refused to sign the 1948 UN Resolution 360 against genocide. They refused because they didn't want any backlash from Native Americans in the treatment of the U.S. government of the Native Americans. So this inspired me. It has taken 30 years in total with all the research and the publication of it to get it before the public. I have researched things over centuries and actually in many different countries to get the materials that are included in my book. As I was researching, I read a lot. It was painful, and I got angry a lot, but I was even more determined to complete my goal. So the first half of the book is primarily focused on the Cherokee people, because there was more information available on them, and they're kind of a microcosm of what has happened to all the Native people across the United States, Alaska, and Hawaii. Racism is, as the book title says, was defined in the 4th century BC by hypocrites. And he said that people on different continents ate different foods, were subjected to different climates, and that determined their lifestyle. When the Europeans came to the New World, they were physically and biologically different from the Native people, and they considered them to be savages. Then as time progressed, we have Manifest Destiny, where the Europeans believed themselves to be superior, and they were determined to populate the continent and make it theirs. Diseases like smallpox were accidentally introduced when the people came ashore to trade or to settle, and thousands of natives died because they had no natural immunities to smallpox and other diseases. Later, history shows that the British purposely introduced smallpox, and the logs of Lewis and Clark reveal they carried vials of the disease so that they could threaten the natives if need be. In 1783, George Washington stated that settlers could fight, that it was a war to exterminate everyone, men, women, and children. Later, they were removed from their homelands, their religions and cultures abolished, and the children were removed and sent to boarding schools, which is a subject that is very much in the news now. Families were moved to different parts of the United States, and all of this was meant to remove, kill, or assimilate the Indians into the white society. Other points that I found interesting is that the Iroquois were one of the world's oldest participatory democracies. Franklin, Jefferson, and others studied the Iroquois Great Law of Peace and drafted the plan for a representative government for the United States based on that plan. In contrast, when the Indians were finally granted United States citizenship in 1924, it did not include 5 basic freedoms. These were the freedom of speech, the right to have a fair and public trial, the right to due process, the right to vote freely, and the right to worship freely. Many tribes were relocated multiple times because the government was determined to make the land available for white settlement. Tribes resettled to lands that whites deemed worthless. But when oil was discovered in Oklahoma, all of a sudden the whites thought that the land was worthwhile and they wanted it back. The Winnebago Nation was relocated 4 times. Their chief finally said, "Why does not the white father put his children on wheels so he can move them as he will?" The Choctaw were making their way to Indian territory when Jackson sent negotiators to meet them. The Choctaw were asked to relinquish some of their new territory, and they asked, why were the Indians not allowed to step on the soil of their new tribal domain before asking them to part with it? There were more than 370 treaties ratified before treaty making ended in 1871. Congress ceased to recognize tribes as entities capable of making treaties. They were declared dependent nations, and Congress had full power over their affairs and could override the treaties. If the treaties had not been disestablished by Congress, then it is law even today. An example of that is McGirt versus Oklahoma, where the Supreme Court decided in July of 2020 that the Indians still had the treaty, per the treaty, the grounds that were given to them in the late 1800s. Oklahoma is fighting this because they say they have the legal say over that territory, but now the Supreme Court has said no. An additional thing is the government doesn't often acknowledge treaties, and Campbell versus Norton is an example of this. Eloise Cobell, correcting my pronunciation, was a member of the Blackfoot Nation in Montana, and she, along with a few others, filed a lawsuit against the United States in 1996. By the time it was settled, there were over 300,000 plaintiffs. And it was Judge Lambert required a government accounting of the monies owed. The BIA couldn't comply because they had lost or destroyed records and because of their sloppy accounting. Judge Lambert also required consolidation of government records. into a climate-controlled underground facility outside of Lexington, Kentucky. Lenexa, Kansas, as part of the settlement. And this facility is as large as the Kansas City Chiefs football stadium. These are some of the things that I have found as I have worked through all of the records from the 1600s through present day. And it continues to be a problem, and the Native Americans have to fight for everything that they get, whether it is defined by treaty or not.
Now, a quick word from our sponsor. At Native News Online, we believe in the power of journalism to strengthen tribal communities. We rely on support from readers like you to fund our daily, in-depth reporting. The funds we raise during our year-end campaign are crucial for 2024, sustaining journalism that matters in Indian country. With the upcoming 2024 election, we will provide important coverage to ensure the Native vote is heard all the way in Washington, D.C. Your funds will be well spent because we are trusted in Indian country. We make an impact by informing and uplifting our people. Our mission is to make sure Native people are seen, heard, understood, and valued. That's why we've written hundreds of stories about Indian boarding schools, the repatriation of our ancestors, missing and murdered Indigenous people, and the overdose epidemic in Indian country. So, during the holidays, please give from your heart to help us reach our year-end, much-needed funding goal. To donate today, please scan this QR code or go to the link below this video.
They have to fight for everything that they get, whether it is defined by treaty or not.
You have given us a long history, historical account of what's happened to Native Americans, and I love that you've spent over 30 years, so thank you very much. And not to cut you off, I guess I want to get to I want to just deal with the title of your book, Native American Resilience, a story of racism, genocide, and survival. And I'm seeing of those four words, resilience, racism, genocide, and survival, two positive words and two negative words. What do you, from your observations, what would you attribute to the resilience of Native Americans? One of the positive words, resilience.
They continue to believe in their religion and in their life, in their matriarchal society as it was when Native Americans were first approached by the Europeans. That has changed somewhat, but they are continuing to keep their culture alive and their languages. And I see that all as being very resilient. Not many other people have been able to do that over time.
Yes. And then you use the word racism, which is a negative word. Would you say there's been racism against Native Americans, perpetrated against Native Americans since the arrival of the white Europeans?
Yes, there has been.
And does it continue today?
Yes, it does. You can look at some of the things that have been done. We're looking at the pipelines that go through sacred grounds. Some sacred grounds are included in the national park system, and so they cannot even access that without special permission in order to have special sacred ceremonies. So racism, definitely, and they are looked down on as not being quite as good as the white society, just like other nationalities within the United States.
Yes. And it is such a harsh word, but it's so true. Talk about genocide, and can you give that definition of genocide as put forth in, what did you say, 1948 by the United Nations?
Right. It was a new terminology that was coined in 1944, and it means killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm, deliberately inflicting physical destruction, imposing measures intended to prevent births, and forcibly transferring children of the group.
Yes, and that's a pretty powerful definition. And one of the words, takeaway words, key words for me is the deliberate, and there's a concerted effort to eliminate. And then overall, I would say genocide, if I was to sum it up, is try to eliminate a people, and that certainly has happened against Native Americans. And what do you think the purpose was of the genocide?
Well, if you can get rid of a group of people by whatever means, then that opens up the land for settlement by the dominant group, and they do not have to deal with or explain their reasons.
Yes, and you mentioned that the United States was very reluctant to sign that in fear of what Native Americans' actions by Native Americans, maybe lawsuits or whatever.
Right.
Yes.
It took 40 years before it was signed, and it was only after it had been ratified and altered significantly by Congress.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I honestly, I'll say this almost leaves me speechless in terms of analyzing that. Just the idea in my understanding as a Jewish individual that came up with the word genocide, right? That entered into conversation, so to speak. And by four short years, it was part of the United Nations document, and it was a pretty powerful word. And so I'm always intrigued by that, because often people just throw that word around. But with Native Americans, it's really true, and it was, using your word, done deliberately. So,
right.
Yes, yeah. And then the word survival is in your title, and then we're talking with Patricia Streng, Native American Resilience: A Story of Racism, Genocide, and Survival. Took her 30 years to write the book. We're happy to have her on. Talk about that word survival as it relates to Native Americans, Patricia.
Well, if you weren't part of a survival group, then why would you be so good at your culture, maintaining your culture, your language, your religions, and raising your children in those same life ways that you have had? It takes strength and determination to do that.
It really does. And I guess in my lifetime, I've seen a resurgence of Native American culture. Because when I was a little boy, it wasn't popular to be Native. Now it's actually kind of popular. Not 100% where we need to be, but that whole notion of survival. And as you well know, at Native News Online, we have done many stories, over 200, maybe it's 210, 215 stories on the Indian boarding schools. And our people survived those boarding schools. And when I say our people, my ancestors, my grandmother went to a boarding school at Genoa. It was the third largest Indian boarding school in the United States. And I love the title of your book, Native American Resilience, and then A Story of Racism, Genocide, and Survival. Those two words, strong words, resilience and survival, are so much of what we talk about often among our editorial staff. Is we have survived, and so it's really very strong. Tell me this: what's been the reception of your book so far?
Well, I have been approaching schools. There's a list of Native American schools that I've sent the information to, also churches, members of Congress. Um, it has been slow. I think because it's purely a history book, it's not as easy to pick up and read as something that would have a lot more action and such in it. There are people that are using it in their classrooms, and that is good. I just hope that people are show more interest, and if they want to go to my website, which is patricia-streng.com, there is a book trailer, and I think they will find that that is very interesting. Also, the book can be purchased from Amazon, and please note that all the proceeds go to the American Indian College Fund in Boulder, Colorado.
That is one fantastic group, and this Native Bidaské is actually shown on the anniversary of Wounded Knee, December 29th, 1890. And unfortunately, historians, it appears to me, it's been my observation, have basically made Native Americans fall off the timeline as if we don't exist after that. And 1890, December 29th, the anniversary of the Wounded Knee Massacre, where innocent men, women, and children were slaughtered and left out to freeze. And it was a very sad day. You talk about the massacre. So,
right. Well, and as I was starting to write the book and I was talking to various people, it's like, oh, well, I didn't know Native Americans still existed, or I thought they only went as far as Colorado, not knowing that you exist all over the United States, Alaska, and Hawaii.
Yes. And Patricia, I appreciate you coming on Native Bidaské, and thank you for your dedicated loyalty, being a reader of Native News Online. And is there any last comments you want to leave?
Yeah, I want to thank you and all of your team members, and please, everyone, support them and spread the word of the great things they are doing.
Okay. And to our viewers, Chi Miigwech, many thanks for tuning in to another Native Bidaské. This is our last episode of Native Bidaské for the year. We'll be back next week and into the next year with other special guests. And it's something we really enjoy doing here at Native News Online. And Patricia, you in particular, being a reader and being an author, it was just a nice fit for you to come on. So Happy New Year to you, and have a safe New Year.
Thank you. The same to you.
Chi Miigwech to our readers. Come and join us next year. Thank you.
If you appreciate what we do here at Native News Online, we invite you to donate to support our continued work covering Indian country. You can scan this code with your smartphone or go to the link located below this video to donate today. We greatly appreciate your support. Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And be sure to scan this code or go to the link below to subscribe to our newsletter. Thank you for joining us today, and please be sure to join us again next week for another episode of Native Bidaské. Chi Miigwech.